Livermore Live Music presents Spotlight, shining a light on Livermore's incredible music scene. Here are your hosts, Rob and Doug Allen.
Hey everybody, welcome to Spotlight. We're here at the studios of Advanced Creative in Livermore, and today the Spotlight is on the Bankhead Theater, and our special guest is Chris Carter, the Executive Director of the Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center. Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're just ecstatic to have you here. Hey, before we get talking to you, we always have a couple of orders of business that we want to attend to. So first of all, we're all having a little something to sip here. Doug, what are we drinking today?
This is Shot Away IPA from Altamont Beer Works, and we poured it in the wrong glass. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Virtual cheers. Yeah.
All right, cheers.
The other thing, and spoiler alert here, is I wanted to get a spoiler for my car, but I couldn't decide between Darth Vader is Luke's father and Bruce Willis was dead the whole time.
The first one.
Okay, go for the first one, right, okay. Now, I told that joke once and somebody said, well, but what if they didn't know Bruce Willis was dead the whole time? And that's why I started it by saying spoiler alert. So if I just ruined it for you, I did warn you.
Which did you pick?
Oh, I'm still thinking about it.
Go with the Batman spoiler.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of the Star Wars theme, so Obi is short for Obi-Wan, and Ani is short for Anakin. Do you know what Luke is short for? A stormtrooper.
2 for 1 today. Nice.
Maybe we should turn to some serious business and talk to Chris a little bit. So Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just start wherever you want, and how'd you get here from there?
Yeah. So, by the way, I love Star Wars jokes, so we could do that the whole time too, if you're
careful.
Will. So, okay. Sorry.
So, at some point, we expect you to share those with some of those with us.
Yeah. So, I'm a Pleasanton resident. Been in Pleasanton for 21 years. I grew up actually in Austin, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And we moved to California when I was in high school. My dad got a job out in Silicon Valley, and I went to Los Gatos High. It's been in the Bay Area ever since. Prior to working at the Bankhead Theater, I've been there for 7 years now, and I've been the executive director for just 2. Mm-hmm. And prior to working at the Bankhead, I was at St. Mary's College in Moraga, working in development. So, the Bankhead Theater, or Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center, is a nonprofit organization. So we have to raise money to keep the doors open. And so development is the fundraising side of what we do. And that's my training is in career-wise is in fundraising and development. And I did it at a university for 11 years. Being in Pleasanton, though, I was getting a little bit tired of the commute, and I kind of hit a ceiling, and I wanted to continue to grow and try new things. And I saw a job for development director at the Bankhead Theater on Craigslist, of all places. Mm-hmm. And I sent my application in through Craigslist or whatever the email was, and I got the interview, and they offered me the job. And this was in 2014. And at the time, it was a little bit of a risky proposition because the Bankhead was going through a lot of changes. And I had a really nice, cushy, steady job. But I love the arts. I love music. I play an instrument. I've been performing most of my life. And it's just been a big part of who I am. And before I took the job, this was kind of interesting. I was thinking about it, and I'd actually never been to a performance at the Bankhead Theater. And they said, well, you should come to a performance. And I agreed. And the performance that just happened to be that week was Leo Kottke, the 12-string guitarist.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And he's like one of my guitar heroes. I play guitar, and I own a guitar that's actually signed by Leo Kottke. I'd never met him. And I thought, oh, well, this is like fate, because this is my, the coolest thing I own is actually signed by this guy who's going to play here. And so I went and I saw the show. I loved it. I brought my wife, and I met some of the people involved in the theater, and I just got this really strong feeling that no matter what, this community was not going to value the space enough that they were never going to let us down. No matter how difficult things might get, there was always going to be people that support it and will make sure that it works. And I just believe that. I still believe it to this day. So I took the job as a development director and was kind of the first really traditional fundraising person. We were able to raise a lot of money, and we did a lot of good things. But one of the things I noticed about myself is I was really looking at what our executive director was doing and finding that what he was doing was really interesting to me too. And we talked about that, and I started to get more involved in his side of the work as well, which is the programming and the facility stuff and kind of managing the operations of the facility. And so I have this development and marketing background, and now I'm kind of learning more about this operational programming side. And so then when Scott Kennison, who was here before, great guy, when he retired, he suggested me for the job, and so I applied, and they offered me to the position.
Did you apply through Craigslist?
No, I didn't have to that time. But they did kind of put me through the process, though. It wasn't just like, okay, you got this. But what was nice is I'd been there for a long enough time. I'd given a lot of thought to like how I would run things and what would be important to me and what does this space really need. And on the fundraising side, I already had a good connection with our donor base, and so that was already in my my abilities. So I think it made a good fit. And so I'm the first ED of the Bankhead Theater that actually comes from a fundraising background as opposed to an arts background. But I think when a place like that, when half of our revenue comes through contributions, that's pretty important. But I've loved the programming side of all of this. The unfortunate thing is about 6 weeks after I started, we had to shut down with the pandemic. So that really altered a lot of things for us. But fortunately, we're back open and doing pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, I see all your gigs on LivermoreLiveMusic.com, and you have quite the suite of music. In fact, I wanted to comment on that. One thing we talk about with Livermore Live Music is not Livermore Live Music, but the music in Livermore is it runs the gamut from a single artist with a guitar in a coffee shop up through national and internationally known acts that play at some of our larger venues, and the Bankhead is one of those. So you kind of represent the end of the spectrum of, you've had incredible artists, some not that well known and some very, very well known. I imagine that's kind of a fun experience for you, is to get to meet those people.
Yeah. And most of them are pretty cool. It's interesting. Sometimes I talk to people and they go, oh yeah, I know the Bankhead. And they kind of try and put us in a certain category of the artists that we present. And I don't know if people always realize the caliber of what we put out here. And, there's a lot of artists and performers that are really A-list at the top of their game, and they don't perform in arenas. They don't perform in large spaces. They do smaller and more intimate venues. And a lot of it might depend on the genre. So you think about like jazz music. Most jazz musicians are not going to play at Shoreline Amphitheater. Maybe Kenny G or somebody like that. But everybody else, names and have seen on TV and everywhere else, they're going to play in a space like the Bankhead, like Branford Marsalis we just had on Monday, or a blues musician like Robert Cray, who was there last week. And then we have John Mayall coming in December. And, anybody that listens to blues music is going to be like, seriously? John Mayall Blues Breakers? That guy? Yeah. He's coming. And so it really is people who are at the top of their field who we get to see. And that's a real privilege. And I could tell you some stories, but for the most part, 99% of the artists that come through are really cool.
You ought to tell us a little bit about the programming challenges over, 6 weeks after you become the executive director, you have the shutdown. So we should hear a little bit about what kind of trial by fire that was, and the kind of programming, just mental gymnastics you had to do to keep things up and running and interesting. And then is there any kind of, now that you're back to sort of normal, or you're getting there, is there any sort of regional consideration that goes into it when you're booking these, or is it just what is the best available that I can get for the day? How do you approach the programming side?
Oh, that's a lot of good questions.
Yeah,
well, when we had to close, so what happened was it was March 12th, and Governor Newsom said, all right, any space that's more than 250 people is not allowed to operate. And that was us. We were at 500, and we had it was actually March 13th, Friday the 13th. And we had a show that night. It was a speaker series performance, and we had to cancel it. We probably could have gotten away with doing it, and I had this call with some of our board members. I said, "What do you think we should do?" And they said, "Let's just be safe. I don't want to do something that people are going to attend and someone gets sick." And so we canceled that, and then we canceled everything else for the next several weeks. So we had an Eagles tribute band coming that weekend that was sold out. We had the opera was in the second weekend. There was a lot of things that were going on, and we initially canceled like shows for the next 3 or 4 weeks. We had to, just doing that is a lot of work, because you have to call all the patrons of the ticket buyers. You have to let them know that's been canceled or it's going to be rescheduled. So do you want to hang on to your ticket? Do you want a refund? We usually don't give refunds, but in this case, that's like, we got to. Or you could donate your ticket back. Well, pretty soon it was, okay, a few weeks out, and then it was like a couple months out, and we just kept, it was like this rolling situation where we were continually having to call agents and managers and trying to reschedule. And we'd say, okay, well, let's look at the fall and think, this is March. And then the fall comes around. And okay, let's look at next summer, Yeah. And they're all under contract. And I don't want to not honor that contract too. So it's not just us and our patrons and our staff. It's all these artists that are really in deep trouble. And, and financially too, we're kind of like, well, what do we do? Because this is our primary source of revenue, and we're having to give money back. And then on top of that day, I had to tell everybody on our staff, we have 55 people on our payroll. If you're hourly, I don't have any hours for you now, and I'm not going to for the foreseeable future. If you're salaried, which there was a handful, I'm going to give you a 40% pay cut just to stay on. And we made really drastic cuts across the board. And, I felt awful. It's like 6 weeks into this. And that day I came home, I cried. I just felt terrible about what I had to do with the staff. And thankfully, pretty much all of them are back. Mm-hmm. And they were able to sustain themselves through this. And we were able to, we kept their healthcare going. If they had a healthcare program, we didn't get rid of that. And so we did a lot of things to do as best we can to take care of them. And the other thing I did as a fundraiser, I called everybody I knew that was a donor. And I said, what can you do for me right now? Or if you had a pledge, can you pay off your pledge? And they really kind of carried us through the first few months. And then we got the EID, the disaster relief loan. Then we got the PPP loan. And then this other kind of miracle happened, is that we got our first estate gift in the middle of all this. So someone who had been a longtime patron had left us basically in their will, and they had passed away, and we got notification of it. And it's funny, I got the letter before the pandemic that we were in their estate, and it takes 6 months, and it's like, oh, that's really cool, but I didn't really follow up. And then once we shut down, I was like, I should see what that is. And it was their house in Livermore. They left it to us. Wow. And so we were able to sell that. And so all those things kind of really helped carry us through the year. And the other thing, you talked about programming, is we still wanted to do things, because even though we were closed, well, what can we do? And Doug, you were great, because we called you, or I can't remember, you called us. I can't remember what happened. We knew you somehow, and we thought, well, let's get some local artists and let's just film some concerts. But the thing is, I can't afford it. I can't pay anybody. And so you donated your services. The artists donated their services. The site, we did it at Retzlaff Vineyard. They donated the site. Everything was donated. And then we were able to put these videos out there, and people could make donations while they're watching the video. And they could also tip the artist, give money to the band as well. Mm-hmm. And so, and by the way, one of the things I've always wanted to do, as I was the development director, I've been thinking about forever, is how do we, better than anybody, there's all this local talent that's really, really good.
Yes.
So it's what do we do to support them? I can't always put them in a 500-seat theater, but maybe there's some other things I can do. And this was a great way to get some introductions into that world as well.
Right. And I just want to comment, by the way, and a couple of times you have put local artists in a 500-seat venue, and near as I can tell, those have been pretty successful. But I think, to me, that's another feather in the cap of the Bankhead or the Livermore Valley Performing Arts Center operation, is your interest and willingness in supporting local as well as these incredible bands from all over the world.
Yeah. And I perform too. I like to get out there and perform, and I'm not as good as most of these other people, but I still know, just for my own sake, I know how hard it is, especially if you're doing original music, how hard it is to get your foot in the door anywhere. And I want to hear original stuff. And even when we did those shows at the Vineyard, I told all of them, I want to hear your original music. Yeah. Don't do covers, play original stuff. And let's feature your art and your work. And so that was wonderful. We did that. We still were able to do some camps and art classes and things like that, all virtually. We did a fundraising event that was virtual as well, and we were able to raise $200,000. And that one, I got videos. We contacted some of these national and international performers that had been to the Bankhead before that always sold out and did really well. And I just said, hey, can you do a 5-minute video for me? And they all did it for free. So we got like Paula Poundstone and Keiko Matsui and Jake Shimabukura, like they all did it. And so it was just amazing to me. Like it's like part of me, I was thinking about like how much gratitude I have for the community for what they did. But it's also, I think they did that because they have gratitude for what we do. And so it really reaffirmed that we're in the right business and we're doing the right thing and pushing the arts out to the community as a meaningful way as we possibly can.
No, you're absolutely right. And we've talked on this show before about the unbelievable generosity of the Livermore community. I mean, I know this show seems like one big Livermore love fest, and it kind of is, but for good reason, because people here, donate a lot. They're just so generous with their time, and they care a lot about so many things. Doug had asked, and I'm equally interested. So talk a little bit about your approach to programming, and how do you think about it? And do you have a dartboard or a Ferris wheel that you spin to pick bands?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. It's we work on it kind of year round, but we kind of look at it as a season. So the season is kind of roughly matches what a school year would be. So starting in the fall and ending kind of in the middle of the summer. And so right now we're in our 21-22 season. And we haven't announced, I've booked shows for further beyond that, but we haven't announced those. We're probably going to wait until the spring to announce those. So that'll be for the following season. And so there's a couple ways we do it. One, we get recommendations from people. So if you have somebody you think would be a good fit for us, I'll do the research. And I'll be, yeah, that might work for us. Or I don't know, maybe not so much. And I look at, there's services that we belong to, this one called Polestar. So you can look it up and you can see what's the average ticket sale for an artist in a venue, what's their gross revenue. And if it's roughly similar to what we do, then it's like, okay, this is in our ballpark. If it's something a lot less, then I go, I don't know if I want to book this person. It's too much of a risk. If it's a lot higher, they're too expensive for us. And then the ticket prices would be too high. That won't sell either. And so you kind of have to find that sweet spot. I do have a lot of relationships with agents. And so there's conferences we go to where you meet with agents and they say, here's my roster. Here's what's touring next year in California. Are any of these a fit for you? And a lot of them know our venue too. And they'll point out, like, I think this would be a good one for your space, or this could be a good one for your space. So we kind of look at it that way. But you want to know what's the artist fee? Always ask for the writer. Because sometimes the fee is not that bad, but then the writer is like ridiculous. Yeah. And the writer is like all the stuff they need. Right. So it could be what's called backline. So it's like they tour, but they don't tour with all their amps and keyboards and all this stuff and their drum kit. They just come in a van. And so you got to get all that stuff. And if it's kind of crazy, or if it's a 20-piece band and they got all this backline. What's the most unreasonable thing you've ever been asked for in a writer? Well, that we actually contracted to do?
The craziest thing that you were asked for.
Both. Answer both. Answer both.
Well, I don't know. There was some of them. It depends on who they are, but some of them, like we don't provide booze, and a lot of writers will ask for booze, and it's shocking, like how much booze they ask for, and alcohol. You're gonna have to have, there's like 3 of them, and it's like, okay, we need 2 bottles of this, and we need a case of this, and 3 bottles of wine. I'm like, really? For 3 of you? For one? You're gonna be there for an hour before the show. Do you really need that? I always get shocked by the booze requests, and usually we always say no. I just cross that out. But then they'll want like their own private office space for the manager with a wired internet access and things like that, or the food has to be a certain kind of food, or you have to. I don't. There's all sorts of things. We had one that actually wasn't like. It didn't bother me. It was actually kind of cool. This one artist asked for a dog to pet, and we did provide that. I know someone who has a therapy dog, and I said, "You want to bring your therapy dog, and I'll get you a ticket to the show." And I thought that was perfect. That's kind of a cool thing.
There you go.
And so we have a picture of this artist sitting on the, on the floor with the therapy dog, just getting loose before the show. But most of them are pretty straightforward. A lot of times we'll do like what's called a buyout. So instead of saying, I'm not going to provide all this stuff for you, but I'll give you $500 and you're on your own. Yeah. Get what you want. So it just kind of depends.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of the ones we get, the writers are pretty simple. They're not too bad. I've heard of other spaces, like if you talk to Wente sometimes, when they get some of those bigger artists, the writers are kind of ridiculous, or it'll be like, you can only have white in the room and people can't look them in the eyes and all this weird stuff.
There's that great scene in Spinal Tap where David St. Hubbins is sitting in the back whining about the sandwiches and the bread's the wrong shape. And I imagine it's stuff like that.
Yeah, there's things like that. But most of the artists are pretty cool, and you get these things, they ask for it, and you just cross it out, and you sign it, say, I'm not doing any of that. And they still come anyways. They want to do the show. Yeah. So it's not that bad.
You think sometimes they're fishing trips, they're just, we'll just ask, all they can do is say no, right?
Yeah.
They want to make sure you're paying attention too, right? Like, you actually have to, some of them put weird stuff in there just so you look at it, I think.
Good point. Yeah.
Probably. One thing we do a lot is we advance a show. So about a month out, our production manager calls the road manager, and they go through the backline stuff, and they kind of come to some agreement, like, well, I'm not going to get you this, but I can get you this. Mm-hmm. And so when I sign the contract with the writer, I'll usually say per advance. So I'm not guaranteeing any of this stuff. We're going to look at it, but we're going to negotiate it during that advance stage. And most people are okay with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's also, it just occurs to me to comment, it's at such a different level than most of the live music in Livermore, right? Most of the gigs, like we just created a system called Connect that is set up to let venues and bands figure out when they're both looking for a gig on the same date and email each other. And usually that's the extent of the arrangement for most local music, right? Is the venue talked or emailed with the band and they say, okay, yeah, we'll be there at 3, we'll play for 3 hours and we get paid X dollars and that's it. And only once in my music performing career have I ever signed a contract.
Yeah.
But you start at a level 10 above that with what you do.
Well, it's interesting with the local artists that we have booked for the stage. Like I have to write the contract and then they sign it. And
you have a writer.
Well, it's funny. Then it's kind of a weird thing because I don't really know what they need and they have to kind of work it out. And, I want them to have a good experience. And so sometimes I'll give them advice. If they're big enough to play in our theater, they need to get a manager or somebody to negotiate this stuff so they don't need to worry about it. Because sometimes they'll say, oh, yeah, because the production, well, do you want lights? Do you want this? And they go, oh, yeah, we want this, we want that. And guess what? That's coming out of the expenses. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, the check I'm going to give you is a lot less than, but they don't know all the time the cost, and they need somebody representing them. It's like when you're the artist, you should just be the artist. Don't worry about all that other stuff. Find somebody else that really knows what they're talking about to help you with that.
Yeah, and for many of them, I'm sure the thrill of just being able to play on the big stage has more to do. It has more to do with the thrill than the check that you're going to give them, which is also nice. But
I hope so. But I like giving them a big check. I think that's cool too. It's nice to to pay somebody the most they've ever made for a show.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And we'll book somebody and I'll say, well, what do you usually get paid? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, I'm going to pay you a lot more than that because I know we're going to sell this many tickets and this is how much I'm going to pay you. And they go, wow, that's awesome. And it gives them a sense of what they're actually worth,
Right.
and what they should be commanding.
And I'll mention, by the way, and it also helps build this sense of musical community that that surrounds Livermore and makes us, special. Maybe not unique, but special. In other words, there's a sense among the bands and the performers here that we're somewhere special. There's 2 Day Town, right? Is a community thing that happens every year that binds a lot of people together. But the fact that people can aspire to at least go watch, if not maybe someday actually be the local band on the stage, is another thing that makes this community special, and it brings people together in a way that, all respect to every place else that's got live music, it's all great, but it's another thing that elevates the situation here in Livermore, and it makes bands want to get better too. And that's another. It's not by accident that we have so many great performers here. There's a bunch of things that make them want to up their game, and the fact that you have local bands playing at the Bankhead is one of those things, one of those magnets.
Yeah. What's interesting too is like, I know as a performer, I'm going to get paid the same amount of money for a gig that I would have gotten paid 20 years ago, for the most part. And that's really the hard thing about this industry.
Yeah.
And I really think if artists need to command more, and people need to pay more. And there's value in what they do. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. There's a lot that goes into being a talent at a certain level. And people should pay for that. And I really want to push that and make sure that people understand the value of what's out there. And it's such a sad thing that doesn't happen.
Well, one of the lesser objectives of putting the whole Livermore live music construct together, but especially the website, was hoping that somewhere down the road we could figure out a way to quantify some of this. And I've taken a couple of shots at it, and I'm open to suggestions, by the way. But the idea being, is there data that would help us show the venues that when you have a band playing there, you make this much more revenue than if you didn't have that band? And, out of that delta, what's an equitable amount that the band ought to be paid? Just bands saying, well, I'm not making any more money than I did 20 years ago, won't motivate very many venues to throw another $50 at them. But if you can demonstrate that the venue made an extra $400 that night because they had a local band playing there, then, it's a different conversation. So if you ever have any thoughts about how to help us, build some of those metrics, I'm all ears.
Well, one of the things that I look at when I book performers is I go to their social media and I see how many followers do they have, how active are they, and that'll help me decide if they're going to bring people out. And I think that should be the same for local artists too. And if I'm a local artist and I want to perform in a venue and we're negotiating a price, I'm going to tell you, well, here's how many people I think I'm going to bring out to this show.
Right.
And there's value to that, and so they need to kind of push that. And I think everything's negotiable, and like I've been paid in wine and stuff like that, but that's fine. But part of it is like I don't care as much because it's not my career. Mm-hmm. But if you're really serious about it, these artists need to command more, and they need to show that they can bring more people.
Well, and that it is now a much more significant stream of revenue than in the past, because 20 years ago they had album sales and things like that, which just basically don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Do you use some of that expertise when you're booking your own band? Like,
no.
Well, I mean, we're saying let's
sometimes.
More.
Yeah, I've.
So talk a
more
little bit about your band. You're in the band called LK Project.
Yeah. And I've been playing with. It's mostly just me and this other guy, and we've been playing.
You can tell us who it is.
His name's Mike Lickus, and we've been playing together since college. Mm-hmm. So over 25 years, we've been performing together in one form of a band or another. And the two of us, we write our own music, and we've produced four albums of original music. And we've always found it's more fun to play our own stuff than to play somebody else's stuff. And we feel like we've gotten better over time at writing music. Right now we're a 3-piece group, so 2 guitars and a bass. It's acoustic. It's kind of singer-songwriter stuff. But it's one of the things, we've done ticketed shows just for us, and we've made over $1,000 just charging. And so then for me, that's like, okay, I know what I'm worth.
Yeah.
I know people, we could make at least $1,000 if we just did our own show and promoted ourselves. And so if I'm going to go to a venue, for me, that's like, that's not my base point, but that's kind of my own frame of reference to what we're worth as a band.
Sure.
Don't
offer me $100.
Yeah, no. But it depends. If you're a friend or if it's a night, it's like sometimes we just want to get out there. Sometimes you want people to hear your music, and so it's like you have to weigh those things. So it's sometimes you take what you can get just to get your music out there. But at a certain point, you have to make a living off of it if that's what your goal is.
Right.
And so I would, anybody that's a really serious artist, they should rent a venue and sell their own tickets and see how they do. And that's their base point. That's how much they know they're worth, for sure.
Where do you like to play?
Wineries are great. They're very supportive of the music industry. Private parties. It's funny, we get a lot of gigs, so we'll play at a winery and then somebody will say, hey, I've got a party coming up and at my house, and could you play at our house? We've done house concerts before. So it's kind of like, well, we could do like a party where it's just kind of background music, or we could do a real house concert where everybody's seated in rows and watching us and we're playing original music. That's our preference. But, we're kind of at a point where we're lucky enough that we've worked together around, we have a pretty deep repertoire. So we can do pretty much anything you need at this point.
Cool. Yeah. And how much of your taking the job at the Bankhead was to get your band to play?
I have played at the Bankhead on the stage before. But I try not to. It's funny, people will be like, oh, because we do these courtyard concerts now with local musicians, and my staff. So, why don't your band? You should get your band to play. And it's that's kind of weird. I don't want to book myself. It's kind of it feels like a conflict. But I get booked enough. I'm out there enough. I'd rather, some of these other artists are incredible. We had, Meredith Mchenry came and she did one of our courtyard shows, and I was just like, I've seen her before, but with other groups and kind of as like the backup singer, kind of with some other musicians, but just by herself, just doing her own music. And I was just like, that's better than anything I've ever seen her in. She's an incredible singer, an incredible talent, and
great entertainer.
I'm thinking, why is she not more well known? And some of it is, she's just got to get out there, and I think she's doing it now. She's more serious about it maybe than she was in the past. But like people like that, like I think the stuff I do, like they blow me out of the water. I'd rather see that than somebody like me on the stage. And the truth is, there's some incredible talent in this region that really should be doing it for a living. And it's hard. The industry is just a tough industry to be in, but I sure wish they could.
Yeah.
They're that good.
In the meantime, there's perks to playing at all the beautiful wineries and places around here, but
you get free drinks and all that, and
it's fun, right?
It is fun.
Most of the people who show up at these gigs are from Livermore. Not all of them. Some of them actually. My observation over the last couple of years is an increasing number of them are from out of town. They heard about the live music scene in Livermore and they come check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing more fun when a gig is over than wandering around the crowd and, thanking people for hanging out and listening, but also getting the feedback from them because again, it's that sense of community here that is just fantastic.
It's so funny. When I graduated college, I was in this band, and it was like a 5-piece band, and we were called Lindy's Kitchen. That's where LK Project comes from.
Huh.
And
I was going to ask.
It was a college band, and we were really rough around the edges, and we would just play anywhere we could get, and we'd play like at bars and these random venues. And the weirdest show we ever did was a middle school dance, and it was at Iron Horse Middle School in Danville. And we just played our own music. We played all this music. They have no idea what we're playing.
Right.
And it was the funniest thing. And I just keep thinking, this is what a lot of artists have to go through. And I wish it was an easier path, but apparently it's not.
Right. And of course, there's an area here of where artists want this to be their profession. This is their income. And I think, I'm not sure what the number is, but I'm aware of about a half a dozen or so, either people or groups in Livermore where that's what they're trying to do. If they're not there yet, they're trying to get there. And then there's another 50 or 60 or 80 bands, I don't know what the number is, that they're like my band. We're a garage band. We're a pretty good garage band, and we can get gigs pretty much where we want to here. Yeah. But we all either have jobs or we had jobs and now we're retired and we're not interested in another career. So most of the music here is just people who do it out of love, right? It's like, I'm not going to make a whole bunch of money at this. In fact, like in my case, I assure you that over the course of my
right?
big negative. Talk to my wife.
The house wins.
Yeah, right. The house wins, exactly. But there is a level here of local musician that is doing it professionally, and then of course you get into the spectrum of the bands that you book at the Bankhead and on up from there.
Yeah, it's just a tough business, and the people that I know that are doing it professionally, they also like teach music on the side. There's something they still have that's like a backup. My uncle, this is an interesting story. So I have an uncle who was in a heavy metal band in the 80s and 90s, a kind of a speed metal band called Flotsam and Jetsam. And you might have heard of them. I mean, they were pretty big for a while. Mm-hmm. They toured with like Metallica. His best friend and the bass player was Jason Newsted, who actually ended up on Metallica.
Yeah.
And they had several albums. They toured. They played in big arenas. And anytime they weren't on tour, he went and was a bricklayer, right? And so it's like he had to do something because there was nothing. So even like at that level, like they're playing to audiences of thousands of people, and then when they're not playing, they still need another job.
Oh, it's a rough business, right?
It's so hard.
For every person that's out there making $1 zillion, there's 9,999 people who are just barely keeping their nose above water.
And there's so many great talented people out there, and that's kind of the fun thing about operating the Bankhead is like we can plug into that. And the hard thing is there's only 365 days a year. There's like, I get calls all the time from agents or, I got this artist, they're coming through and I just can't book them because I don't have any space.
Hey, Doug mentioned something I wanted to chase earlier. So out of every 100 people who come up to you and say, Chris, you should have XYZ play at the Bankhead. Out of 100 people who say that, like how many of them is like, that's a good idea, I'm going to chase that. How many of them in your head are you thinking, okay, if I get time, I'll think about it. And then how many of them are in your head, you're like, that's never going to happen?
A lot of them are, it's never going to happen. But you know what? I looked every one of them up.
Oh.
I still do my research.
That's the artist in you,
well,
I think.
There might be something I don't know or I'm not, thinking of. Yeah. And there's things I like, but there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't like or listen to that is very popular.
Right.
And so why I can't always trust my instinct. Most of the time my instinct's right, but you never know. And I do, and sometimes it's funny, someone will mention something to me and I won't really know about it, and I'll mention it to somebody else and they go, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. And then it's okay, yeah. So people are thoughtful and they do need to think about, okay, it's a 500-seat theater. I'm not going to get Taylor Swift, that's who Eric Swalwell suggested when I met with him. So he's like, oh, I'd love to see Taylor Swift. Okay, well, that's out of my price range.
They're $10,000 tickets.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah.
Do you ever though get requests from artists who are looking for an outstanding intimate venue to play in, and they're willing to not make $1 million that night just for the opportunity of playing in front of an audience like that?
Sometimes, the tricky thing is it does. There is cost for us, even if it's an inexpensive artist fee. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the production cost is higher than what I'm paying the artist.
Yeah,
and so I still have to cover that. And I don't mind kind of net zero, but I can't. It's hard to lose money, and
sure, especially for a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's a tough business, and I want to pay my crew a fair wage. I want to pay the staff. It takes a lot to operate a theater, and what people don't understand all the time is it's just as expensive to operate a 500-seat theater as it is a 1,200-seat theater. because we've got the same size staff.
Right.
I still need a box office. I still need a production manager. I still need a facilities person. I still need a house manager. I need everything that they need.
Right.
And I'm not making as much money because I don't have as many seats. And so, and then it's the same thing for a 250 seat theater. So they're in a tougher situation than I am. And so you really have to be thoughtful about who you book, and it has to make sense.
Yeah. One thing before I lose the bubble on this, that if you haven't been to a show at the Bankhead Theater, and it could be a comedy show also. We were talking about live music because that's what this is about. But the Bankhead Theater is such an outstanding venue, right? There isn't a bad seat in the house. And then I think you combine that with the quality of the crowds that come. I mean, people here just like to be entertained. And, I don't know. I've never been an artist on that side of it. But I remember, I was there one night. I watched Mark Cohn play.
Yeah.
And, I think the crowd was just incredibly supportive of them and was showering love on them from the very beginning. And then somewhere in the middle of the show, I think during the intermission or whatever, they got word that their flight back that night had been canceled. They weren't leaving. So they came back out and they said, well, we thought we had to, run to the airport after this, but we don't. So we're going to play a little bit longer. And they played another 45 minutes, right? And I think that had to do with what an incredible venue it is and how much fun they were having playing in front of that crowd in that venue. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, it's a great crowd, and I would say we're very lucky in Livermore to have that space because most communities do not have a space like that.
Right.
It's because of the support from the community that space exists, and it's very rare to find an independent arts space like that. That's a nonprofit. That's that size anywhere. I can think of a handful in California.
Yeah.
So we're extremely lucky to have it. And it would not exist if it wasn't for this community that you're talking about that just loves the arts and loves live performance. And, you think about part of me feels like some of this came out of the fact that we have the Livermore Lab right here, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this highly educated population. They appreciate the arts, and we're a little bit too far away from San Francisco to just make that an easy jaunt to go see that. And so it's like, how do we bring it here? And I think, some of that, the Livermore Cultural Arts Council came out of that idea. And then some of these other groups came out of that. And then the Bankhead Theater was really a result of all of, 50 years of that interest and making those things happen. So it's not like it just came out overnight. So
kind of continuing along that line. So have you got big things on the horizon? I mean, I know it just on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis, it's about, finding the talent, booking the bands, dealing with, dogs to pet and things like that. But are there long-term strategic goals that you're working on for the Bankhead and its future?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. Originally our plan was always, how can we be sustainable? Because we live on what we make like everybody else. And operationally, a 500 seat theater cannot support itself without contributions. It's interesting. We're actually doing a press release on this. So with the pandemic, it came a lot of hardship, but also came some opportunity. In that we were able to get some grants that we never would have gotten before.
Oh.
And there was one that came through recently, this Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. And it was a federal grant. And it was for any venue like ours, performing arts venue, that was closed because of the pandemic. And you could apply for it. And it was substantive. It was a lot of money. And so we applied for that. We applied for the supplemental version of that. And we ended up just receiving $1.2 million and an award. We also had that estate gift that came through. We've had some other very sizable gifts that have come in. And I have this fundraising background, and while we're closed, we've been really working hard on that piece because we could still do that. And we kept our expenses down. And so now we're in a really positive position to where I can look out and say, long-term, we're in good shape. I got an operating reserve. We're laying the seeds for an endowment. There's all these things that you need to really be sustainable for everyone's lifetime. So we're there. which I'm feeling really good about. We're essentially there, and there's not much more to do in that area. So then it's kind of like, okay, next, what do we want to do? And it's what kind of programming do we want to do for this community? And for me, it's, you ask about like kind of what do we think about when we're booking? It's we want to broaden our audience. We want to be an arts organization for everybody. So how do we be more contemporary and more relevant? And I love our current audience base. I think they're great, but I think there's a lot of people out there that haven't been able to experience what we can do.
Right.
So what can we do to make it a more friendly space, to draw other people in that might not think about coming to that space? So we're working on that. And then, we want to be involved in the schools. We want to work with Las Positas College. We want to have programs where people understand they can have a career in the arts, and they can do internships at the Bankhead and learn about the field. And so we're trying to broaden our programming outside of the Bankhead Theater.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what you'll see next in the next few years is you'll see us kind of popping up in other spaces, that it's not just the Bankhead. It might be another facility somewhere else. It might be a partnership with another organization that's like-minded. And, I just had a meeting this morning with the managing director of the Grand Theater at Tracy. And it's like, okay, how can we work together? What can we do to bring great artists and performers to both of our locations?
Right.
So there might be some ways we can work together. And so think kind of long term, that's kind of where we're going. We want to expand our footprint out there.
Really good sense.
Yeah.
I'll just comment. So we have strategic discussions about who goes to see live music in Livermore, whether it be a single artist in a coffee shop, all the way up through the big names that are at the Bankhead and at Wente's. And part of the discussion is, well, Livermore, there's 100,000 people here. How many of those people aren't aware of this? How many would go and either just go to the local winery and watch a band, all the way up through, go see one of these great names, but they don't understand, they don't know that this incredible music scene is out there. Any thoughts that you ever have about that, not just for the Bankhead, but for the community in general? Let's stay in touch.
Yeah, one thing that's difficult in Livermore, and I totally understand it, but signage. You really think about it. There is a signage ordinance in the city, and for good reason. But it's like our space. I still have people that, where is the Bankhead? And they're like Livermore residents. Really? Right. It's the biggest building downtown, but it's kind of set back. And there's nothing really overt on the building that indicates what it is. And so we need to do a better job of putting a spotlight on these spaces. And I don't think we do that well enough. And I think that would make a big difference in
I agree. Yeah. And it's a process. You and I were talking before we started that I'm hoping over time, in a reasonable way, to engage the city and some of the other organizations around the city to better appreciate that music in Livermore is a special thing. We're not just a community that has some bars and some bands. Again, all respect to other places, that have a lot of fine music, but we're not that. I think Dave Haberman came up with the phrase, the Austin of wine company or country. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but it's close.
Getting there. He's from Austin.
Yeah, that's right. You are. But we're really special, and I'm not saying that. It's not Livermore Live Music trying to promote my website. I'm trying to shine a light on, or we're trying to help shine a light on what's in fact going on here. And I think it would, in addition to what you're talking about, it would help over time if we can help the city see that and start talking about the live music thing as another magnet for this incredible community here, along with the labs and the downtown and the wine country and the rodeo and all these other fantastic things that go on here.
Yeah. It should be like a trademark for Livermore. This is, if there was a slogan for Livermore, what would it be? And I think what Haberman just said, the Austin of wine country, something like that. Yeah. That's pretty cool. By the way, my sister still lives in Austin, and she sent me a text the other day, and she's like at a bar, and there's Jimmy Vaughn like just performing in the corner. Yeah. And we've had him at our theater, but it's like that's Austin. So that's just so you know, that's kind of where they are as far as their level. But I agree. I think there is a lot of opportunity here, and I think the businesses around the downtown and the wineries would probably benefit from pushing more live music.
They absolutely would. I mean, there's a few iconic places and then a number of lesser known, but in the United States. But Bourbon Street and Beale Street, and Austin.
6th Street.
6th Street, yes. Where, that's where you go. If you want to go on a music vacation, you go there and you rent a hotel room, and for a week, you just wander the streets and dive in and out of places, looking at this incredible live music. You can do that in Livermore right now today. Any Friday or Saturday night on a warm evening, walk First Street or, be careful, have a designated driver, but drive down Tesla, right? And you will find a ton of live music.
If I had a couple $1 million right now in my bank account, I would open up a live venue, like a smaller space somewhere downtown Livermore.
So would I.
Yeah, because I think it would do extremely well.
And I think, by the way, with the hotel coming and with all the new housing that's going in and around the downtown, all of a sudden that population and that appetite for live music is just going to go up. And I'm right there with you. In fact, maybe we should talk. Maybe we can, invest.
Get some invest.
We can invest together. I mean, every musician, right, wants to own a bar where they're the house band, right?
Definitely. I'm in. Let me know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll play there.
Cool.
You got it. We'll get you out there.
Hey, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Any points we've hit on that we didn't dive into, or any questions we should have asked that we didn't?
I think we covered everything pretty well.
Any shout outs you want to give to your staff or people that, I know that list is probably long and you're always afraid of leaving somebody off, but.
Yeah, it is very long. But we do have this incredible staff, and especially the ones that hung on and came, the ones that hung on and stayed, like we were able to kind of work through the pandemic, and then the ones that waited to come back, because I know how hard that was. And I was funny. I was like doing like reviews with some of them, and I was like starting to cry because like, God, what you put up with to make this happen. And the truth is the people that work at the Bankhead love it so much. It's such a precious jewel to them. And they want to make sure that it's sustainable, that it's successful, that it's well taken care of. If somebody comes in and, they don't want anybody to trash that space. They really value it so much. And I can't say enough about the staff. They're so good. And then the patrons and the donors and the members, like, would you be a member if there was like no place to go? I mean, that was the thing that blew my mind. Our membership is the highest it's ever been.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't, like, when we were at our worst time, people stepped up the most and really helped us get through that. And, that's, and then we had people like Doug who just like, yeah, I'll film this. No, don't worry about the charge. We'll take care of it. We had Uncle Credit Union was our season sponsor. Mm-hmm. And I had to call them. I'm like, I don't have a season for you. They said, we're still doing it, and we're going to renew for next year. And that was incredible. And then when we did that fundraiser, we had like Fremont Bank and some of these other donors, and they all just stepped up. And, it's hard. And it's like, for me, it's like, well, you're not even paying, you're just paying for us to like help us keep the staff here, and we're not even really doing that much. And they valued what we did so much that they were willing to do that.
And they wanted to be there, when the night's over.
Yeah.
So to speak.
And it's a shame, you watch the news or you read a lot of the press and you just think the world's coming apart at the seams. And I don't know, maybe it is, but I mean, these things that we're talking about here don't get enough coverage, and all of the goodness and all of the, the incredible charity that people have for their communities and for their neighbors doesn't get enough press, because, that's really what the world is about. It does occur to me, I need to change my endowment, because right now I'm an endowment member of the gym. I send them money every month, but I don't go. So maybe I should change and just give that money
over.
to the Bankhead. Yeah. Is there a treadmill back in a corner someplace just in case?
You want me to get one?
No.
It's on his rider.
I still wouldn't use it.
Yeah, put it on your rider.
Yeah, there we go.
It's just the one thing about, and we were talking about this before we started this, is just like how art and music and it's like, it's not political. There's nothing about it. It makes you feel good. It reminds you what it means to be human and how to enjoy life and enjoy things in life. And oftentimes we're reminded of these other parts of our lives that are not enjoyable. And, I was telling you about Tape Face, and there's like 500 red balloons flying around. Like, it's like, who doesn't love balloons?
Yeah.
And it's like, you could be 5, you could be 95, you could be left, right, whatever. I'm going to hit that balloon.
Yeah.
It's just going to feel good. And I'm not going to think about anything else at the time. And sometimes that's what art can do for you. Other times it can make you think, and it can change your mind.
Right.
It can move you in a way that an argument might not. And
it can open your eyes to things that you otherwise wouldn't have been willing to
yeah.
think about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they use in other countries where there's dictatorships and there's not a lot of freedom of speech. It's the arts is the way that's how they move people
Right.
in a certain direction. And sometimes it's the only way you could move somebody. So on the one hand, it helps you forget about things. On the other hand, it helps you be a better person.
Right.
And so what's like what bad can you say about it? So I love it. I work in the best, most fun, exciting industry.
It sounds like you got a great job,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more pleased.
Keep it
Listen,
up, Livermore.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely right. Thank you so much
Sure,
for
thank you.
being here. This has been a lot of
Hope
fun.
I didn't go too long.
Really insightful. Oh, no. This was,
Okay.
a very interesting conversation.
I'm going to cut half of this.
I hope people stayed for the whole thing because I think there was a lot of interesting discussion here. So again, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank
All
you.
right.
Cheers,
We'll see you
Chris.
all next time.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.